Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
I'm kicking off 2023 with Michael Bush, the CEO of Great Place to Work, the global research and analytics firm that produces the annual Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list. He's also the author of A Great Place to Work for All. Better for business, better for people, better for the world. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Kathleen. Happy to be here.
Great to have you today. I met you at Vistage International, where you spoke to so many of us and inspired us so greatly to build a better place to work that I couldn't wait to have you on this podcast today.
Well, thank you.
So, let's start with the obvious. What makes a great place to work? What's the formula?
Yeah, the formula is the for all, is making sure that the organization is focused on every person that's in the organization, regardless of how long they've been there, regardless of their role, regardless of their level, pay, compensation. Everybody is having the same kind of an experience, which we call the for all experience. The way that we measure that experience to help leaders know what they could do more of or less of is we know that people want to work for somebody that they feel respects them. We know that people want to work for somebody that they feel is communicating with them in an honest way. We know that people want to work for a leader that they feel is fair and equitable. And that is probably the most important component. People really don't like working for a leader who they feel treats some people one way and treats other people differently. And so we measure those things that I just mentioned. We are a company, an analytics company. And so we ask probably 10 questions about each one of those three things. And then we go on to measure whether or not you enjoy the people that you work with, which is actually a reflection on management because they have the responsibility of hiring your teammates. And we measure whether or not people feel like they have pride in their work, which is really, do people around them care for them and do they care for the people that they work with? And finally, do people feel like they're part of a team, which we call camaraderie? So it's those 6 things that we measure that let us know that a person is having a good experience. And then you do demographic comparisons to make sure that you're doing all you can to make sure that the experience is consistent across all the various demographic groups in an organization.
So for leaders, I love this concept for all. I love the concept. How do leaders, business leaders, human resources leaders, leaders of any departments and companies get over the judgment part?
So the challenge for leaders is, number one, hopefully the purpose of the organization inspires a leader to want to get better. Anybody who wants to get better has some sense of humility because it means that you're not already great. So you want to get better. So that's the starting point. And because if you've got some humility, then you're open to getting feedback to try and get better and not feeling, I'm not a good leader or I'm not a good for all leader, which just kind of leads to depression. But instead, having the humility to know that, I need to get better. And what we use is the analytics, which I think leaders can actually do this somewhat without the analytics if they know that if you're leading, 20 people, if you're leading 15 people, some of the people are having a great experience of you, meaning that you're respectful, you're honest, you're fair. Some are having a neutral experience is what we call it. Sometimes they have that experience, sometimes they don't. Some are having what we call a negative experience. They just don't feel like you care about them. And they will say in the survey, you care about them as an employee, but you don't care about them as a person. So if a leader is humble enough to know that's every leader on earth that has those uneven experiences, then that leader can then move to be curious to find out, what's going on and what is it that I am doing or I need to stop doing in order to create a more consistent experience for those that are having an inconsistent experience. So that's really the leadership loop from I'd say victim mindset to responsible mindset because the organization needs you to be a better leader.
And that humility piece is a great point because when I go out and speak to people, there's this general, hey, isn't what I'm doing enough? What more can I do as a leader? And why do I now have to worry about their families in addition to the employee? And there's a lot of confusion on what you call the leadership loop and how I should show up. They're generally just don't know what to do next. And I see a little bit of anger out there. Do you, Michael?
I feel, Kathleen, that as we have moved into 2023, something is changing. I feel like almost like the butterfly, coming out of the chrysalis, after a great transformation. I think that the past few years, where the world has gone through trauma after trauma after trauma together,
Yes.
which is historical in terms of that. And people are not only angry, they're tired, they're frustrated, they're going on vacation and coming back needing more of a vacation. So that's what trauma does. So people like to think that, well, COVID rates are down, and sooner or later we'll get better. We're learning how to live with it so we can move on. It just doesn't work that way. So we've got people, everyone, including those in denial, who have gone through a trauma. It's going to take time. Looking at human beings and how we experience things, it's going to take us a decade to get, quote unquote, over the COVID experience. And those who are going to talk about it and accept the reality of it are going to get through it sooner. It's as simple as that. So for organizations, let's think about this, Kathleen. Every organization right now, it doesn't matter what country you're in, you're facing inflation.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what country you're in, you're facing recession. Doesn't matter what country you're in, you're facing higher interest rates. It doesn't matter what country you're in, you got to decrease the carbon footprint of your company because the earth is in trouble. So these are the realities. So it's kind of like, hey, I just want to be angry and frustrated and sit on my rock and feel like a victim. You just can't do it. And a leader certainly cannot do it because of those realities that I just walked through. So it's really, it's put your mask on first, like on the airplane.
Yes.
Leaders have to work on their well-being. They have to work on their physical health. They have to work on their mental health. And there's a linkage between those two things. People who are working on their physical health, it's easier for them to work on their mental health. And they have to work on their financial health. Because if your financial health is impaired, you exercise less and you meditate less. So these components of well-being first have to be worked on as a leader. And a leader who's leading a team and talking about these things, who isn't doing them on their own, that's an inauthentic leader. And the people aren't going to change either. So this is why it starts with the leader. This is really important. Now, the good news is, if you're angry and frustrated, you're going to do better if you start to work on these things. But it is work. I believe that your organization's purpose, hopefully, is inspiring enough that it'll inspire the leader to actually do this work.
Absolutely. I love the leadership loop, and I love the work on yourself first. My daddy always said, if you have your health, you have your wealth. So focus on your health first, and then you can help other people. You also made an interesting comment about as a leader, focusing on the employee versus the person. And we need to focus more on the person versus the employee. Tell us more about that piece, and how do leaders really transition from you're my employee, which I don't believe anybody belongs to anybody else anyhow, versus you're a whole person who comes to work and you bring everything with you, your dog, your kids, your relationships, your reality, everything that happened to you on the way as a human comes to the office. Tell us about that mindset for a leader.
Yeah. And so let's say that as people are listening to us today, Kathleen, and they're like, oh, golly, I have to do more. So that's what they're feeling. And by the way, I'm doing well is how they feel. I'm doing well. My projects are ahead of schedule. My projects are under budget. So actually, I don't need to change anything. Well, 62% of the leaders we work with are exactly what I just described. We call that the transactional leader. Organizations do pretty well with a large percentage of those leaders. They, have good gains in market share, good EBITDA, good free cash flow. So you can do those things and have a good business. I don't think you can lead that way and have a great business that's going to tackle the complex things that we're talking about that are facing the world today. So in order to be great, which is a never-ending pursuit, you have to, that leader that I just described, which 62% of all leaders, has to work on moving up to be leaders that we call good leaders, leaders that we call inclusive leaders, leaders that 80% of the people who work for them connect with them and feel like they're cared about. A transactional leader will give feedback to a person inconsistently and in a way that is sometimes inspiring and sometimes it isn't, and is often pretty poor, as a matter of fact, at giving developmental feedback. Because in order to give developmental feedback, you got to care about the person. You got to talk to the person. You have to listen to the person. You have to know things about the person, because you need to be able to use that knowledge to deliver a message in a compassionate way that's very direct in some cases. Hey, Joe, if you don't work on these things, I know you've got issues. I know that you've got some things going on at home that are problematic, and we have an EAP program for that. But this attendance issue, you're going to lose your job, Joe. And I don't want you to lose your job, because we're much better when you're here, but we need you here on time. That's what a caring leader does. Big difference between that and a transactional leader. And a person who is able to do that across gender differences, across age, across how long you've been at the firm, regardless of if you're in production, manufacturing, or sales, you have a way to connect with people, not job category, not people who are like you, but with people, and connect their work to the purpose of the organization in a way that inspires the person when they're getting that feedback. That's what we're talking about. That's the next level of leadership, which moves the organization from good to great. The difference being, you got people who are feeling needed, people who are feeling cared for, people who are feeling necessary, people who are being challenged, people who are being pushed, who enjoy all of those things when it's done the right way. And they know they're part of an organization that's doing a lot of great things, which is what everybody wants to be a part of. That's the purpose of the organization. An organization that exists just for EBITDA and cash flow isn't that inspiring to anyone. But an organization that is actually making a difference in the community is inspiring, and that can hopefully inspire a leader to change. And by the way, employees don't change if their leaders aren't changing. So there's a powerful connection in terms of behavioral change between what people see their leaders do and what they see that their leaders aren't actually doing.
And it goes back to your point of humility. It's okay as a leader to say, I don't know, or I don't understand, tell me more. And that is actually more powerful than, coming in with assuming that you have all the answers. So I love that point of view. I also love your use of the word care, because I wrote a book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, and it's all about building those relationships with your people. So because our companies are built on cultures that are actually communities based on people who have relationships with one another that are respectful, and we understand what's going on in each other's lives. As I grew up, I'm 56 years old, and some of us were taught as we grew up in the corporate world, you leave your personal life at home. So what is step one in helping some of our leaders build that relationship? If they have been trained, leave your personal life at home, how can they take step one to open up those conversations, to build those relationships, to put people first?
I think what people need to do, Kathleen, is read your book. Because here's the thing. It's like you talk about the secret weapon, which is care. And it's amazing because I know you have this experience. Somebody goes, hey, how can I be a better leader? You got to care about the people who work for you. Yeah, I know, but really, do I need to work on my Excel skills? Do I need to become better at data science? You need to care about your people. Okay, that is the secret weapon. That is the thing that gets somebody to give, I like to say, more than 100%. Because people are actually thinking about how to make things better for their colleagues and their customers while they're walking their dog.
Yes.
So that's what happens when people care, because it's such an unusual experience. And there are companies, we survey 14,000 companies a year. There are companies where employees get treated better at work than they do in society. Many. Because society, depending on who they are, doesn't really care about them. But the workplace does. And people respond when they're being treated in the way that we're describing. So the thing that in terms of Dare to Care, and we have the analytics to support what happens when you do that. And it doesn't matter if you're a hospitality company, it doesn't matter if you're a tech company, a logistics company, a retailer, across all industries, this connection and what people want, it's the same. Whether you're in Bogota, Colombia, or in Toronto, Canada, it's the same. You could be in India, it's the same. This is the thing that links us as people. And people make a decision pretty quickly whether you care about them or not. And when they realize that you don't, they decide to have a job. The last thing you want is people working for you feeling that they have a job. That you are only a means to like economic ends. Because that doesn't take that much. And you don't get the passion out of the person, and you don't get the innovation. You get innovation by few. Organizations that have a high sense of care and community, you have innovation by all. And how do I know? Because we measure it. We ask people whether or not they are willing to give more effort to the company. We frame that question in a way, it's not, we're going to give you time to innovate. It's no, you're going to continue to do what you're doing. Are you willing to give more? Not and get more money, not and get promoted. Are you willing to give more? Where there's a strong sense of community and care, 89% of the people will say, I am willing to give more. You know the power of a company in these times where people will say, I'm willing to give more. They're only doing that because they're feeling that they're a part of something, part of something that matters, and that human need is being met. So even the hardcore capitalist leader, if you want to make more money, this is a way to do it. Dare to care.
Absolutely.
It's actually the way to do it. It's not a HR thing. It's not a culture thing. It's a business thing.
You are absolutely right. We have all been through a lot over the last 3 years, and I want to get into how leaders can get more involved in helping with this mental health component. But we have to take a break. Coming up in the second part of my chat with Michael Bush, the CEO of Great Place to Work, Michael talks about the importance of acknowledging high performers.
There's a couple of people, let's face it, that if they left, it doesn't really ruin your day. And then there's a couple of people who, if they left, it can destroy your day. And so we're all like that. And so the key is making sure those people who are really important, what are you doing to make sure they know it?
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.